Okay, back at the bench here. Finishing up a larger T2 than what I got posted as a 15. It's gonna look, or actually sound really badass, but I told you guys, I guess about a week and a half ago, I had the coronavirus here this weekend, on the 24th, and it took me out for a day or two. This is like the 4th time I've had it, so not that it's old hat, but it's, you know, it's a speed bump in what I do. But I wanted to talk to you about coils. Tilo Stompler of TC Sounds, he was talking about what BL factor is. Okay, and I don't want to get too sciencey on you because I end up losing a lot of you guys. So, but B is the magnetic force within the gap. Let me grab the gap. Just gonna use this up. I'm out of space already. So this is your positive, right? This is your top plate. This is your T yoke, right? Because it's in the shape of a T, right? Because this is the base. Looks like a T. This is your negative. This is your positive. So what happens is the coil floats in the gap, right? So when I ask for the gap dimensions, what I'm really asking for is the OD of the pole and the ID of the top plate, also known as a washer, because that's how China looks at it. It's just a big ass washer. So, and you want to see, this is just a random coil. I don't even know if it fits. It doesn't. Okay. So the coil floats within that gap, right? And so when I ask for the gap dimensions, that's what I want to know. What I also want to know is just generally how tall it is, how many slugs, how many, you know, like basically how long can the coil be is what I'm really asking. And then also how thick the top plate is, which tells me where to center it. So BL is a combination of B, which is the magnetic force, which is the flux within this gap. That is determined a little bit by motor structure design, but for the most part, all of them are about the same. Some of it depends on how enriched this material is, this ferrite, whether it's neo or ferrite or whatever it is. It gives it almost like an electrical charge. I'm sure it's measured in like Tesla or joules or something like that. But it sort of gives it a potential, and when it's magnetized, it creates a flux across here, and you can measure it. It's measured in Gauss, and you can buy a Gauss meter if you're a little, you know, Radio Shack guy. I don't use them because they're dumb, and it's one of those things where you start. It's like a dB drag. It's like, why are you doing this? This is dumb. It's for nerds. You can say, oh, I have this many Tesla, blah, blah, blah. You know, and you know, if you're building a plasma furnace, you know, for fusion reactor, then sure, you need tokamak oven or whatever the fuck it's called. Yeah, you start talking about Teslas and how many magnets, Tesla magnets they are or whatever. But this is very low power compared to stuff like that. And the BL is the B is the magnetic force. We covered that. The L is the length of wire. Okay, so this is a standard. What is this? Okay, this is my version of the SA coil, which is Sundown. It's a dual 4. This is I'm going to just generalize here for the sake of math. This is 100 winds, 4-layer coil, dual voice coil. So what happens when you wire this? Typically this is a dual 4, so it's typically going to be wired in parallel. So it doesn't cut your windings in half, but it keeps them at 100. So it's 100 per 2 layers, right? So there's 2 layers on this coil and 2 layers on this coil, right? Gives you a total of 4 layers. That's what 4 layers mean. And this is what's called a monofilament, meaning it uses a single wire as the conductor. Okay, so this is a pretty standard coil. When you wire the voice coils in series, your wind count doubles, right? They get added together. So now you have 200 winds in the gap. The problem that a lot of people see is that your impedance goes up as well, which is fine, you know, if your amp is, in this case, you know, stable for 8 ohms, which is like, you know, you can buy, you know, 5,000 watt PA amps, professional audio, pro audio amplifiers that do 5K and 8 ohms. That's fine. They're very high voltage. So, but that's actually the higher BL, and you can actually verify this, not just with me. It's just something that I noticed. It was on Phi's website, Scott Atwell's company. When he does the tail small parameters, the BL numbers, the BL product, which is a combination of those things. Anyways, it's a combination of those factors, and when you wire them in series, your BL factor is higher. And so I realized that one of the things that nobody's doing is doing a low impedance, high wind count coil. And so that's what we were doing for a little bit when we had the Mac coils, which was dual half ohm, and then I'd hardwired it in series, so you have all 8 layers, and you're talking about 70 millimeter tall fucking wind. There's just a magnificent 8-layer coil, and all 8 layers were in the gap, so they all counted. What you don't realize is when you wire your voice coils in parallel, wire them down, you don't cut your wind count in half, but you eliminate the possibility of having a higher BL product. So for the most output, the most SPL, the most, you know, maximum you can get, you actually want to have the coils in series. And you'll see this, you can either do it, you know, manually here, like if you have a dual voice coil, you just wire them in series. You can hardwire it here, or you can do it on the outside through the tinsel, through a jumper. The best way is to just have them do it at the factory, and that's where you get single voice coils. I get asked a lot, you know, what's better, single or dual? There's no difference. A dual just means they've put 2 layers on, and then they've made a tap. This is the tap. Here's your positive. Positive is always on the left. Positive, negative. So they've done 2 layers, and then they did a tap, and then they put on another 2 layers and did a tap. So other voice coils here. This one is a so it's a little bit of a fib, but nobody talks about it because we don't want to freak you guys out. This one is sold as an 8-layer, but it's not really an 8-layer. That's because it's what's called bifiliar. Bifiliar means it has 2 filaments, 2 conductors that are typically wired always in parallel. Now, you technically you can, if you're careful, wire them in series so that you get maximum BL. The problem is that the wire is typically too small on its own, and it'll typically burn out when you push it. So that's why when it's made by failure, you want to use it the way that it's meant to. So this one happens to be a dual 2, and it's by failure. So technically it's a quad 4 ohm. And so if you pull these off like this, you find out which one's positive or negative. Like, let's say that's one coil, that'll be 4 ohm, and then that'll be 4 ohm. So, but because it's a dual 2, typically people wire that in parallel to get 1 ohm. So what you end up with is really a 2-layer coil. And so that, it really kind of punches your BL right in the face. Do you get to 1 ohm so you get maximum power out of your amplifier? Yes, but at the sacrifice of, you know, now you have a 2-layer coil that's like super thick wire, which you could have done anyway if they just designed it different in the first place. So sometimes that happens because they don't have the wire in stock that you need, and sometimes it's because the gauge of wire that you need just doesn't exist. When designing it, I worked a lot with John Van Ree, formerly at Precision Econowine, and you know, like it would come out to like, is it a number 26 wire or is it a number 28 wire? And I go, what about 27? He goes, dude, 27 doesn't exist. You know, I'm just using that as an example. I have no idea if 27 gauge wire exists. It probably does. But it's sometimes it's an in-between, and so there's a give and take. So whenever you're designing a coil or asking a coil manufacturer to make something, you want to give them the gap dimensions, and then they kind of go by industry standards about what kind of shim do you want on the inner diameter, and then also what kind of clearance do you want on the outer diameter of the coil. And then you usually want to give them a plus and minus, of how tall you want it to be, and then also a plus and minus of where do you want the DCR, the direct current resistance, to show up at. Sometimes you can, I really don't want to get into this with these SPL guys about impedance plots. But I'll do it. So the DCR is direct current resistance. Impedance is resistance over an AC circuit. So music is an AC circuit, meaning it changes polarity, and that's based on frequency, and that's what gives you the notes, the music. So the resistance of a coil in a musical situation such as it is, it's dynamic. The impedance is dynamic, meaning it changes over frequency. And there is a Z max, which is the maximum impedance, right? Which is also where the resonant frequency is. So let's say the resonant frequency is 27 hertz in this particular driver. So it'll resonate at 27 hertz, and that's where the maximum impedance will be. So, which is typically, it can be really high. It depends on how peaky it is, but sometimes it's like at 27 ohms. So, but that's where the woofer is most efficient, and so it requires the least amount of energy. And so what SPL guys will do is they'll use that to their advantage, or at least they try to. They end up failing and burning up a lot of amplifiers a lot. The idea is to sort of load down your SPL vehicle with really low impedances when you look at it from like a macro picture, where you go, oh, it's running at like 0.15 ohms, but really if you're only playing that one frequency, that resonant frequency, you're really talking about 8 subwoofers wired in parallel, but they're all at 27 ohms, right? So then you take 27 ohms, do the math on 16, whatever, and it ends up being like 1.3. So can you get away with it? Yes, because it's in real life at that one frequency, it's really only 1.3 ohms, which the amp handles just fine. Now the danger is that if you go to anything outside of that, you are going to destroy your amplifiers and electrical system, because it's nowhere near, it's much lower impedance than what you calculated for that frequency, and that's why you end up with these problems. That is what's called impedance rise, okay? And people go, oh, I've compensated for that. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Stop thinking about it. It's a hack for SPL competitions. That's it. You should not use it daily. You should just calculate impedance regular. And it's funny. Sometimes people ask me, it's like when you go to the dentist and he's like, well, make sure you brush your teeth. And it's like, well, he actually makes more money if you don't brush your teeth, right? So why is he telling you that? Guy probably gives a shit about you. So I give a shit about people. I grew up very poor. I live a pretty good life now, but I'm still very poor. I'm not successful in the areas that I want to be yet. And I still give a shit about people. Give me some fuck you money, and guess what? You're going to hear a lot of fuck yous. But right now, I still give a shit about you. And that's why I tell you, don't do that. Don't wreck your stuff. The other problem is that I get people that abuse their equipment, and I get blamed for it over and over and over again. Whether I built the subwoofer, or I touched the subwoofer, or I set their gains, or I made a recommendation. If you're burning subwoofers, that is your fault. That is not my fault. That is not the manufacturer's fault. That is nobody's fault but your own. Is it devastating? Yes. I've done it many times. But I'm very honest with myself, and I go, did you do stuff you kind of felt like you shouldn't have been doing? Yes. So Is it a big deal? No. And that's why I got into building subwoofers, was mostly because I was poor, because I couldn't afford. God, you kill a woofer back in 1991, you're talking about $300-400, and minimum wage was $3, so that's a lot of money. And so I learned to just I read the Loudspeaker Cookbook, and I listened to a lot of professionals, and I got to meet a lot of engineers that used to work at a lot of the companies here. Here in Phoenix, we have a very long legacy of car audio. My tech is based here. That's Lloyd Ivy and his son. And my tech owns, like 20 brands now. And the most popular is probably MTX and Acoustic. And then they also bought Extant, which was an upstart. The guys that started Extant also started Esoteric, which my tech also bought. And anyways, that's a whole other movie, I guess, I want to do. We'll see if it happens. But anyways, I have a lot of experience in the industry, and I have a lot of cocaine and hooker stories about these guys making money. I mean, like insane amounts of money, and blowing it. So, but the one thing that has not changed about the industry is that this actually pays better than drugs, and the margins, I should say. It doesn't necessarily pay that much, but the margins are better than they are in cocaine and weed, at least. I don't know about the heroin and all that other shit. Anyways, and it's fun, and it's the cops leave you alone. I have lots of cop friends, and we help them do systems for their stuff, and it's great. And I really feel like I'm helping the community, and that's what I want to help you guys do. So I would implore you to please listen to the things I say and the things I recommend. Don't listen to the car audio shop guys, because they give zero shits about you. They want as much money out of you as possible, and they will tell you anything to get that money out of you. So real quick review. I want to kind of wrap this up. It's already 17 minutes. Jesus Christ. Okay, so this is the original, I should say. This is the TC Sounds original true sub from that Tilo had developed with Bob Carver for their Sunfire subwoofer. This one is dated 2003. This is a more recent version. I think I had it made like in 2018, maybe 2017, one of those. It was mostly to reproduce it. I get a lot of these, and I wanted to be able to just do some extra stuff, so I wanted a longer former. So I had John make me a version. Come to find out, this is a really heavy coil. This is a 6-layer, all copper coil, and then the gauge on this is pretty thick too, as far as voice coils go. This is probably an 18 gauge, and it is very, very heavy. This was in the, let's see, I don't want to move too fast. I noticed that made me kind of sick. This is the driver. Tilo had developed that for Eclipse for a short time. Let me take that off so you can see that. That is also a version of the 689 frame. That is the 689-200, as in 200 millimeter. The B frame, which was used for Sunfire by TC Sounds. And the coil is a 6-layer copper coil. It ends up being right around 4 ohms DCR. And that fucker moves a lot. And having that heavy mass and that really big magnet and then that really big amp, they put like a 500 watt amp to it. And fuck what Bob Carver says. It's not 2,700 watts. That's ridiculous. It's dumb. It's a little bit of what's the word? Artistic interpretation of what an amplifier can do. But anyways, it's basically a 500 watt amp paired up with that motor, which is pretty reasonable. Sundown makes subs like that, but nobody uses a heavy coil like that. And typically it's because, in car audio, you want those low impedances so you can hit 1 ohm or 2 ohm or whatever your amp is stable to. So, But I'm having some fun with it. I'm building a prototype for my buddy Mike. He's a pretty eccentric guy. I took 2 layers off, so now it ends up being right around 2 ohms. And he's going to be running a 1,000 watt Class D to it. Class Ds tend to behave the same at about 1 ohm or 2 ohm. If it's 1 ohm stable, it'll basically do the same power at 1 ohm or 2 ohm. I've gotten a lot of heat over the years for saying that to people, and they just don't understand how an amplifier works, and that's fine. I'm done arguing with turds in a turd swamp. This is the quad coil. As much as everybody wants a quad coil, it's really kind of an octopus. It's really a bit of a mess. Concept had came out with these. Again, I think it was to promote. This one happens to be quad 1 ohm. And this is what I use for the Sunfire. Tilo's original version of the coil, he used a bifiliar 8 ohm. So it's actually a dual 8 bifiliar. And then because it's bifiliar, he wires it in parallel, so that gives you 4. And that's how he was able to achieve 4 ohm. This one is a quad 1 ohm. And then what I do is I wire all 4 coils in series, and I get 4 ohm. Personally, I think I get a little more boost, a little more BL. And the clients that I've built these for really seem to like them. So they go nuts for it. Oh, this sounds better. I'm like, well, I don't know that, but you know, when you get a compliment, you take it and you say thank you. But I think that's long enough for fucking voice coils, even though I could go on. If you have questions, please let me know. This one was this is my version of a Dyer coil. This one's a dual 8 ohm, which I love, by the way. The 2-inch platform is very, very flexible. I have a whole video planned on just 2-inch coils. But this one I like because when you make a dual 8 ohm, that's kind of beefy. This is the poor kid in me. What I do is I don't do it anymore, but I used to go to Goodwill and buy these receivers, these old receivers that are just, you know, I got a shit ton of them all over the shop. So, and I got a whole basement full of it. It's just crazy. It got a little out of control, but the idea is that you just use one coil per channel, and then that way you've now paid anywhere from $5 to $20 for a 200 watt subwoofer amplifier, which is a really good deal. And so the problem is finding either 2 8 ohm, you know, subwoofers that can take that kind of thing, which is hard to find in home audio without paying an arm and a leg. But as a car woofer, it can be found pretty cheap, but you got to find somebody that can build them. And what do you know? I build them. So I build those a lot for people here locally because it's not something I want to really ship. And people get turned off by 8 ohm. I used to do the same thing too, but that was before I knew any better. And it makes great subwoofers, and there's a lot of happy people here in the valley. Oh, I will end with this. This is I want to promote this. I'm trying to bring back, you know, nostalgia is a thing that is not what you remember. It's what you think you remember. And so this is I forget the name of the color, but me and the Magic Wand at Powder House, he was able to find it. And this is the same powder coat that was used on the Orion NT series, Intense. And so what I want to do is I want to sell these frames so that either you can just put it on your wall and include an Intense sticker that we still have from the auction from 2003. And or you can use it to rebuild your own. This for me is my personal one. This is a quad stack that is actually it got glued on a little crooked, little tiny bit crooked, and so it was rubbing. And so what I did was, this is the voice coil that fits it, but what I did was I took off 2 layers, and it was originally used in the Dyer Shiva as a dual 6 ohm, which can also be interpreted as dual 8, but whatever. The DCR is 6 ohms. Anyways, I took off 4 layers, so now it's a single 4 or a single 6 ohm. And you know, what do you know? It's just so you know, it's marketing when they say sound quality or SPL, like that kind of stuff. For the most part, So this is going to be a very, very stout single 6 ohm 12-inch subwoofer. And it's going to come with an NT sticker, and I'm hoping somebody gets jazzed about it and says, you know what, I think that is worth $200. I'm going to give $200 to Patrick for that beautiful piece of artwork that I'm going to listen to every day. And I say, I'm glad I could help you. So this is Patrick from the Robot Underground. Thank you guys for watching.